All right, guys, this week we're talking about ecology and looking at what's in your community around you. So ecology is the study of interactions among organisms and between organisms and their environments. We're going to look at how organisms interact with each other and then how they affect the world around them. All right, so first thing we're going to look at is the level of organization within the community. All right, the first thing you have is the individual. So in here, we're looking at the individual moose. Okay, this is the interactions that he's going to have with his surroundings. Then you go up to the population. This would be the group of moose, like this guy too, that live in that area. Okay, so they have to belong to the same species and live in the same area to be considered a population. Then you go even bigger and you get to the community. This is that individual group that you were looking at, plus everybody else who lives in that ecosystem. Next, we go even bigger than community and we get to ecosystem. The ecosystem is a collection of all the organisms that live in the place, so the community plus the non-living. So we're going to do community plus mountains, water, temperature, okay, all of the non-living things. Then we get to biome. Biome is a group of the ecosystems that have the same climate and dominant communities. So think of like your tundra and your rainforest that you did when you were younger. After that, we go up to biosphere, which is just the whole planet Earth. And here's our picture. We have individual, population, community, ecosystem, biome, biosphere. So from individual all the way up. And then we talk about types of organisms that are going to be in these ecosystems. So you have producers. Producers are autotrophs who do photosynthesis, and they take sunlight and make carbohydrates. These are always going to be green, because to do photosynthesis, you have to be green. Then we have consumers. These are heterotrophs who have to eat. We have to eat things to get energy, okay? So consumers are heterotrophs, producers are autotrophs. And our consumers are going to be animal, fungi, protists, and some bacteria. All right, so when we talk about consumers, we can have really specific types. We can have herbivores. Those eat plants. That's like Mr. Elephant here, okay? You can have carnivores. Carnivores eat animals. Let's say the tiger. He'd be a carnivore, all right? Or you can have omnivores, and omnivores are going to eat plants or animals, and that would be this bear. He's an omnivore, right? He eats berries and fruit, but he also eats fish. Next type of heterotrophs or consumers that we have are decomposers. Decomposers are a little different because they're going to eat the plant and animal remains. All right, so what they do is they either eat dead things like snails, crabs, and earthworms, eat things that are dead, or they decompose by secreting enzymes to digest the dead material. Then they absorb the organic matter, and that would be bacteria and fungi that do that actually like secrete enzymes and then absorb up through their roots. So even though fungi grow, they're actually consumers because they're eating stuff through their roots. Movement through an ecosystem would be next, all right? So substances move through an ecosystem, and we can represent that using pictures or diagrams. The diagrams that we use are going to be a food chain, a food web, an ecological pyramid, or a biogeochemical cycle. The bio is living, geo is non-living, and then it's a chemical that cycles. For that, we have water cycle, carbon cycle, or nitrogen cycle. To start this, we need to look at the energy flow. So energy flows from the sun. So from the sun, we start here. We go to producers, who are autotrophs. Then producers get eaten by consumers, who are heterotrophs. All right, energy flows in one direction. We're always going to go from the sun down. And all the energy on Earth comes from the sun. We need that to stay alive because we need plants to live. Next, we have food chains, and a food chain is just a series of steps where organisms are going to transfer energy by eating other organisms or being eaten themselves. And we're going to show where energy is going using the arrows. So I have an arrow here, here. It's saying that the grasshopper is going into the shrew's belly, right? This one, the grass, is going into the grasshopper's belly. So it shows where the energy is going to go. We can go a step up and look at a food web. A food web is just going to be a connection of a bunch of food chains. See, this is one food chain, but we know that things in life don't just eat one thing. So now we're showing kind of realistically all the things that you can eat so that we can look at what happens if something dies and see how that affects everything else. An ecological pyramid is a diagram that shows how much energy or matter can be found at each trophic level of a food chain or a food web. So at each level, at the producer level, at the herbivore, at the carnivore, and at the top carnivore, how much energy do we have there? We can show energy in these, we can show biomass in these, we could also show population size if we wanted to. What you need to realize is that as we go up, we're decreasing in size, and we actually decrease by 90% as we go up the pyramid. So here's one in more detail. It shows you each step in a food chain or food web, and it tells you that each step in the food chain or food web is called a trophic level. All right, the first trophic level is going to be the producers, that's this. The next level is going to be our primary consumers, right? Ooh, that should be a 0. Then we have our secondary consumers and our tertiary consumers, okay? And then most of the energy that is consumed gets used in daily life. So this little grasshopper, most of what he eats, and it's 90% of what he eats, actually is consumed just by movement, maintaining his body temperature, and building proteins. Only 10%, only part of it, actually goes into like making him bigger, into his actual body tissues. So that means when he gets eaten by this guy, when he goes into his belly, the mouse is only getting 10% of the energy that he had, because that's all there is. So he's only passing 10% of his energy on to the next level. And then the mouse uses all of that energy to live and to run around and to maintain his body temperature. And 10% of the mouse's energy is put into his tissues. And that 10% gets passed up to the snake. So each time we go up, we're losing some energy. So we can have no more than 5 levels exist because we're going to run out of energy in our pyramid. Next, we look at our biogeochemical cycles. These are pathways by which elements or chemicals are going to move through the living and the non-living parts of our environment. We have water, carbon, and nitrogen cycles. And what happens here is the chemical or the element is going to be recycled and used and reused. Here's the water cycle. I want to start with precipitation. I got it twice. So rain comes down to the earth, or snow, or sleet. It collects in ocean, surface runoff, and underground. Underground, it's going to go to the trees. In the ocean, it's going to evaporate. Surface runoff can evaporate. And we have evaporation up here. Evaporation is when the heat changes the water to vapor. For the plants, it can go through transpiration. Transpiration is when you lose heat, when you lose water through the pores of the leaves. Then all of this goes to condensation, and it becomes clouds again, where we can have precipitation. Make sense? Next, we have the carbon cycle. Carbon cycle is just photosynthesis and respiration. Okay? Photosynthesis is when plants take in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and release oxygen. They're going to lower the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Whereas cellular respiration is opposite. It's when animals and plants release carbon dioxide into the air, and they're going to increase the amount of carbon dioxide in the air. So humans impact the carbon cycle. What happens is we're going to cause problems with the carbon cycle because we use fossil fuels, gas, and stuff like that. That's petroleum, crude oil, and coal. All right, and we burn fossil fuels. It produces about 21.3 billion tons of carbon dioxide a year. A lot, too much carbon dioxide for the plants to actually handle. What happens is the plants can only take up half of it. They can only take up 21.3 billion tons. They can only take up half of the 21.3 can be taken up by the plants. So that means we have the other half just hanging out in the atmosphere. And this carbon dioxide is what kills our ozone layer. And it's going to lead to global warming. Last cycle, nitrogen cycle. I like the nitrogen cycle. It has lightning in it. All right. So lightning and bacteria down here do this first step, which is called nitrogen fixation. It's when nitrogen's changed to a usable form. Usually it's done by legume plants. These are beans. All right. And then we have assimilation. Assimilation is when plants take up the nitrogen right there and they use it. Ammonification is here. It's when the dead things turn the nitrogen into ammonia. All right, so when we are going to take our decaying matter and turn the nitrogen into ammonia. And then we have nitrification, which is done by nitrifying bacteria right here. And they're going to take your ammonia and turn it to nitrates. And then denitrification, which we turn it nitrification, then we go denitrification. Denitrification is going to take the nitrates and turn them into nitrogen gas so that it's back up here and we can use it again. And then it goes back through the process. Make sense? Thanks for listening to this lecture this week, guys.